Fellowship of the Broken, Making Sense of 12-Step Recovery by Angelo. Chapter 2, Preamble. 12-step recovery works simply because it's a spiritual solution to a spiritual problem. A spiritual solution requires action. As my understanding has grown, I increasingly see the necessity for persistent, consistent spiritual practice. There can be little recovery without it. There are millions of people around the world engaged in 12-step recovery, many of whom will undoubtedly have their own views and beliefs as to how and why the program has worked for them. There are many others too who are deeply skeptical for any number of reasons and believe that numerous alternative recovery strategies render the 12-step solution unnecessary or out of date. Given the potential for disagreement and a multitude of differing viewpoints, it's perhaps understandable that I am a little hesitant to share my own particular understanding. Recovery is an individual journey, yet I am increasingly finding that my experience is helpful to others. If I can explain in broad terms why it is that recovery based on spiritual principles works, not only as a solution to addiction in general, but also as a much improved basis for living, then it seems to me that the effort needed to write and publish a book on this subject is very worthwhile. Since completing my first book, my own spiritual journey has taken me in many different directions in pursuit of deeper knowledge and understanding. At the same time, I've remained active in 12-step fellowship and spend significant time sharing my experiences and trying to be of service as best I can. The combination of spiritual practice, continuing research, and working with others has inevitably led to a deeper understanding, albeit an individual one. As I understand more, I marvel at the depth and profound wisdom of 12-step literature. This wisdom is not new, nor do I claim any ownership of it. We all absorb new information in varying ways and at different speeds, and we often initially fail to grasp the significance of new concepts if they don't fit in with our preconceived ideas. The underlying principles of 12-step recovery are radically transformative. Yet we're prone to resistance because we don't really want to be transformed. We may want improvements in our lives or relief from particular addictions, or perhaps just to feel better about ourselves, but the idea of complete transformation is often not attractive. The need for fundamental change implies that our current approach to life is not working for us, and such humility does not come easily. We're prone to justify our own behaviour and blame others, rather than fully admit that we ourselves are the problem. One of the insidious features of any addiction is that the consequences of such behaviour tend to get worse over a period of time. This can, and often does, lead to a point of desperation, and ironically, it is only then that we become fully willing to embrace a radical solution. There are many treatment options available, and much has been written both for and against the efficacy of 12-step recovery. Recovery rates are difficult to establish due to problems of definition and data gathering, but peer-reviewed studies indicate a success rate for Alcoholics Anonymous of only 5 to 10%. Reference The Sober Truth by Lance and Zachary Dodds, with the likely rate towards the lower end of this range. This measurement relates to those who are sober after 12 months and still actively engaged in recovery. A recovery rate of only 5% coincides with an estimated spontaneous remission rate, indicating that those who do recover would probably have done so with or without a 12-step recovery program. On the other hand, It's interesting to note that the same 12-step program is used by numerous fellowships covering a range of addiction issues, including substance misuse, behavioural issues and emotional health problems. The appendix at the end of this book lists 48 such fellowships, and I've probably missed a few. It seems that there is something in this approach that works across a broad range of human conditions and from which a great many people have benefited, despite apparently disappointing success rates. I do not consider myself qualified to conclude that 12-step programs are the only way to fully recover from addiction-related issues. What I can say, based upon my own recovery and the experiences of the many hundreds of people that I've met along the way, is that 12-step recovery does work in a powerfully transformative way. The extent of such transformations varies greatly, which is understandable, given that each case is unique, despite the many similarities. If the program works so well for a minority of people, then perhaps a better understanding of why it works may increase the chances of success for others who still suffer. Rather than claim that 12-step recovery is a miracle solution for everyone, my assertion would be that such programs are a gateway to a life based on spiritual principles. My observation is that the personal ego mind of human beings is by nature fearful and selfish, and that such selfishness generally increases when perceived basic needs are threatened. A certain amount of selfishness is needed for simple survival, and hence it is a necessary and key part of the human psyche. However, this selfishness tends to extend beyond basic needs and impacts all aspects of our lives, both individually and collectively. A great deal of suffering arises from self-centered behavior, of which addiction is but one example. Spiritual principles are fundamentally based on unconditional love for everyone and everything. The suggested antidote for fear-based selfishness is therefore a movement towards selflessness based on unconditional love. This is the basis of 12-step recovery, a program of action targeted specifically at moving the basis of identity and behavior away from the ego self in favor of the underlying spiritual self. This provides the power to overcome addiction and also tends to blossom into all aspects of life. A destructive, selfish, negative basis for existence gradually transforms into a productive, selfless and positive experience. Other treatment options may well lead to a cessation of specific addictions, but they risk missing the opportunity for such an enlightening metamorphosis. This is a shame, not only for the individual, who may well continue to suffer from negative emotional experiences, but also for all those with whom the individual interacts. An addict in recovery based on spiritual principles not only benefits personally and ceases to be a burden on society, but is also likely to lead a more useful and harmonious life. There are always exceptions, of course, but my experience has been that the people I meet in recovery are generally of a level of self-honesty and humility, the like of which I have rarely met elsewhere. In order to begin to understand why a program of action based on spiritual principles can work so powerfully, I believe that it's first necessary to explore in depth what spirituality actually means to each of us. This is a contentious area where there are innumerable viewpoints and beliefs. My own approach has been to remain open-minded and to investigate many avenues of spirituality, including the major religions, ancient and modern spiritual wisdom, wide-ranging spiritual practices, and modern scientific theories. Much of this is outlined in detail in my first book. far more than we think, making sense of spirituality. But my continuing journey has deepened my experience and understanding, as I imagine it always will do. My knowledge is far from complete, and in many respects, the more I learn and know, the more I realize that I will never fully know. What has emerged, though, is a broad concept of spirituality that encompasses all that I've discovered and experienced. The words and cultural settings may differ with apparent significance from one belief system to another, but the principles that underpin all of them are fundamentally the same. It's tempting to think that the underlying nature of reality is too complex to begin to understand. Yet, the picture that emerges from spiritual wisdom is surprisingly simple. Just as the enormous complexity of the entire global computing landscape ultimately boils down to simple binary code, so the spiritual wisdom of the ages points to an almost unbelievable simplicity. It's so simple that most of us never think to consider it, yet once understood, it suddenly explains a great many things which previously made no sense. My intention, therefore, is to explain these simple spiritual principles as best I can, and then use this understanding to analyze the nature of addiction, how and why 12-step programs can work so powerfully, and also reflect on the benefits of fellowship and shared recovery. In addition, I will consider why perhaps this solution does not seem to work for the vast majority. My writing is not intended to be an academic exercise. I've drawn from numerous sources, all of which are available online and easily verifiable. If you find that you doubt what I'm saying, then it would make sense to validate it for yourself. I've no reason to mislead. The chapters that follow are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as best as I can tell. The writing deliberately makes extensive use of repetition and summary. It's been my experience that it often takes repeated exposure to new ideas before the wisdom begins to penetrate our pre-existing thoughts and beliefs. My hope is that this book will be useful on several levels and eventually lead to improved success rates. To those already benefiting from the spiritual way of life, I offer these thoughts as an interesting perspective. For those in 12-step recovery but stalled at any particular level of understanding and practice, I hope that these words will encourage you to look deeper within yourselves. To the many who feel that 12-step recovery is not for them, my hope is that these explanations will encourage you to give it a try. For those who have a loved one who is suffering from addiction, it's my wish that these words will give renewed hope that recovery is possible. And finally, for those who are skeptical or antagonistic towards 12-step fellowship, my hope is that this book will shed some light on the perceived murky undertones. The anonymity held so preciously by such fellowships is intended to safeguard the humility of those in recovery rather than hide any dark motives. There will always be a minority who miss the point and use the fellowships for their own selfish ends, but the majority stand as testament to the tremendous positive benefits that spiritual action can bring.